In the year 2048, something incredible happened far away from the crowded cities and noisy machines. Deep inside the high mountains of Peru, a team of scientists made a discovery that could change everything people thought they knew about the universe. These scientists were studying strange signals coming from space, trying to understand if we were alone or if other life was trying to reach out to us. But what they found wasn't just a signal. It was connected to something much older, something from the past. Deep beneath the rocky soil, hidden in a dark cave, they found a chamber made of black stone. Inside, walls were covered with strange symbols that no one had ever seen before. These symbols looked like pictures and lines, carefully carved thousands of years ago. They were so old that even the oldest books could not explain them. An elder from a nearby village was brought in to look at the carvings. He was one of the last people who still remembered the ancient stories passed down by his ancestors. When he saw the symbols, his face grew serious. He whispered words that sent a chill through the room. "These are warnings. They are not meant to be ignored." He told the scientists that long ago the elders of his people had warned about these signs. They said that somewhere in the universe there was a power that should never be disturbed. They said this power was so strong and dangerous that challenging it would bring disaster. The elders' words were clear. Never challenge what sleeps between the stars. The scientists were confused. How could a warning carved in stone thousands of years ago be connected to signals coming from space now? Was it just a coincidence? Or was it a message meant for this time, for this moment? The elder explained more. According to the stories, the universe is full of forces beyond human understanding. Most people live their lives without noticing these forces, but some ancient civilizations knew about them. They learned to respect these powers and warned others not to provoke them. The symbols were a way to pass down that knowledge to future generations. They were a reminder to be careful, to listen, and to never make the mistake of thinking humans are the most important beings in the universe. The lead scientist, who had spent her whole life studying space, felt a deep conflict inside. On one hand, she was a person of science. She believed in facts, experiments, and proof. On the other hand, what if this was true? What if the elders were right? But she also knew that many people would not take these warnings seriously. They would say it was just superstition, a story made up by people who didn't understand the world. Despite her doubts, she decided to share the discovery with the world. She wanted everyone to know what they had found. The symbols were decoded, and the message was sent out to space, hoping for a response or at least to understand what was out there. But what no one expected happened next. The universe answered back. At first, the response was quiet. Small things started to happen. Time seemed to move strangely in some places. Lights appeared in the sky that looked like waves of color, not like the stars people were used to seeing. Magnetic fields around Earth began to change, causing strange noises on radios and disturbing electronic devices. The scientists were amazed and frightened. The ancient warning seemed to be coming true. The power between the stars was awake and aware. The elder who had warned them disappeared from the public eye. He spent more time alone, meditating and speaking softly about a force named Jurash. He said Jurash was not evil, but it was a force of balance and judgment. It did not attack for the sake of destruction, but acted to restore order when things became unbalanced. The world's leaders were divided. Some wanted to use this new knowledge to build weapons and protect Earth. Others believed the only way to survive was to stop all signals and remain silent. But many ignored the warnings and pushed forward, believing humans could control anything. Meanwhile, strange events began happening across the planet. Satellites stopped working, space stations lost contact. A ship sent to explore Mars vanished without a trace. It became clear that the universe was not just watching, it was responding in a way no one could fully understand. Then something terrible happened. A small town by the coast disappeared completely. There was no explosion, no sign of damage, no survivors. It was as if the town had been erased from existence. Panic spread. People began to fear that the warning was more than just a story. It was a real threat. At the same time, the elders' words echoed louder in the hearts of people. They remembered the warning, never challenge what sleeps between the stars. But the damage was done. The challenge had already been made. As the story spread, some people refused to believe the danger was real. Others prepared for the worst. The world was at a crossroads, facing a threat from the unknown that no one was ready for. The lead scientist felt the weight of responsibility. She had tried to open the door to new knowledge, but now she saw that the door had opened a path to something dangerous. She knew she had to find a way to protect humanity before it was too late. The Elder's warning was not just about fear. It was about respect and humility. The universe was vast and powerful, and humans were small in comparison. The mistake was thinking that humans could control everything, even the mysteries of the cosmos. The ancient symbols on the black stone wall were a reminder. They told a story of civilizations that came before, civilizations that ignored the warnings and paid the price. Their worlds were lost, their stories forgotten. Now humanity faced the same test. Would they listen before it was too late? Or would they ignore the warning and invite disaster? As night fell over the mountains where the chamber was found, the stars shone brighter than ever. Somewhere out there in the quiet darkness of space, the universe was watching. And waiting, the warning had been given. The challenge had been made. The war was beginning. After the strange signals from space were sent out, something unexpected began to happen. At first, it was small things that hardly anyone noticed. But slowly, these small things grew bigger and more frightening. It was as if the universe itself was responding to the message Earth had sent. And not in a friendly way. People around the world started noticing strange changes. In some places, time seemed to behave oddly. Clocks would speed up or slow down. People felt like a few seconds had passed when really it had been minutes. Others reported seeing strange lights in the sky. These weren't the usual stars or airplanes, but waves of color moving across the darkness like glowing ribbons twisting through the night. Electrical devices began acting strangely. Radios picked up strange noises, soft, whispering sounds that no one could explain. Phones dropped calls, satellites lost connection, and power grids sometimes flickered or failed completely. Scientists tried to find reasons, blaming solar storms or technical faults, but nothing made sense. These events were too unusual, too perfect to be accidents. In the middle of all this confusion, the elder who had first warned about the symbols disappeared from the public eye. He stopped speaking to reporters and refused to attend meetings. Instead, he spent long hours alone, meditating and quietly warning those who would listen. He spoke of a powerful force called Jirash, not a creature or enemy, but something greater, something like a force of nature. Jirash, he said, was not evil, but it was a force that kept balance in the universe. It was like a judge that acted when things went out of order. If someone challenged it or ignored its rules, Jirash would respond not with anger, but with the power to restore balance, sometimes in ways humans could not understand or control. Many people didn't believe him. They thought he was scared or maybe confused. Some laughed and said these were just stories from a distant past, not meant to be taken seriously. But a small group began to listen. They watched the sky and heard the strange noises. They felt the fear growing quietly in their hearts. Meanwhile, governments around the world faced a difficult choice. Some leaders wanted to use the strange signals and the technology behind them to build powerful new weapons. They believed that if Earth could control this mysterious force, no other nation or enemy could ever threaten them again. Others argued that the only way to survive was to stop sending signals into space. They said Earth should go silent, like a hiding animal in the forest, hoping the universe would not notice or care. But this idea was not popular with everyone. Many powerful people thought silence was weakness, and that trying to control the force was the only way forward. In the middle of this political struggle, strange events began to grow worse. Satellites suddenly stopped working. Important space stations where humans lived and worked above Earth lost all contact. Communication was cut off. Nobody could explain what was happening. A ship sent to explore Mars disappeared. It had been in contact moments before, then vanished without any warning or explanation. The crew was gone and no distress signals were received. It was like the ship had been swallowed by the darkness itself. Then something terrifying happened on Earth. A small town by the ocean simply disappeared. There was no explosion, no warning, no survivors. The town was erased as if it had never existed. People searched for answers, but there were none. It was the first clear sign that the warnings might be true. Fear spread like wildfire. People began to believe the elder's words, that the universe was responding to a challenge from Earth. The power between the stars was awake and watching, but still, many tried to ignore the danger. Some thought it was a trick, a natural disaster, or even a hoax. Others were too busy with their daily lives to think about something so far away and strange. The lead scientist who had helped discover the ancient symbols felt a heavy weight on her shoulders. She had hoped the discovery would bring understanding, maybe even friendship with other life in the universe. Instead, it seemed to bring danger and fear. She worked harder than ever, trying to understand the strange events and find a way to protect humanity. But the answers were difficult, hidden in mysteries far beyond human knowledge. She often thought about the elders' words and the stories of civilizations that had come before. Those civilizations had also ignored warnings and tried to control forces they did not understand. Their worlds were lost, erased from history. The lead scientist knew that humanity was now facing the same test. Would they listen before it was too late? Would they stop and respect the power they had awakened? Or would they continue to challenge what should never be challenged? As the strange events grew more common, more people began to change their minds. They stopped arguing about politics and technology. Instead, they focused on survival. Communities started to come together, sharing resources and knowledge. People who had never met before helped each other. Fear and uncertainty created new bonds between strangers. In quiet moments, many looked up at the night sky with new eyes. The stars were still there, shining brightly, but something had changed. The universe was no longer just a silent, distant place. It was alive and watching. Some dreamed of peace and understanding, hoping that the force named Jurash would show mercy. Others prepared for war, expecting the worst. The Elder's warning echoed in the minds of many. Never challenge what sleeps between the stars. It was a simple message, but it held the fate of all humanity. As the days passed, the world waited, holding its breath. The challenge had been made and the universe had answered. But what would happen next? Would the force bring destruction, or would it offer a chance to learn and change? No one knew for sure. But one thing was clear. The story of Earth and the universe was entering a new chapter, a chapter filled with mystery, danger, and hope. The world was no longer the same. What started as a mysterious signal from space had now turned into something real and terrifying. People who once laughed at the idea of an ancient warning were now silent. The strange lights in the sky had not stopped. The unusual sounds coming from the radios were growing louder, but that was only the beginning. One morning, all of Earth's satellites suddenly stopped working. Every screen went black. Navigation systems failed. Weather reports stopped. Even military satellites, which were guarded with the highest security, were completely silent. It wasn't a system glitch or a human error. It was something else. Something had reached up into space and turned everything off. People around the world were confused and scared. Airplanes had to land without GPS. Ships at sea lost direction. Television networks could no longer broadcast. The world, which depended so much on technology, felt helpless. Governments tried to calm people. They told everyone it was just a temporary technical issue. But scientists and engineers knew better. There was no error in the code. No storm, no damage. Something or someone had done this on purpose. It was too clean, too precise. Then came the worst news yet. The space station that had been orbiting Earth lost contact. One moment, everything was fine. The next, nothing. It was as if the station had never been there. A rescue mission was sent within hours, but when the team arrived, they found nothing, no wreckage, no signals, no bodies. The space station was simply gone, erased. People started to panic, not just in one country, but everywhere. Something was happening that no one could explain. And now people believed the old man, the elder who had warned everyone from the start. He had said, "Never challenge what sleeps between the stars." Most didn't listen. But now they were living through the result of that mistake. The world leaders gathered for emergency meetings. Some wanted to fight. They said Earth had been attacked and it needed to defend itself. Others believed the only way to survive was to stop all contact with space, destroy the signal towers, and remain silent. But even as they argued, something else happened, something that no one could ever forget. In a small country by the sea, a peaceful town disappeared. It wasn't an explosion. There was no fire or smoke. It just vanished. People who lived nearby said the sky above the town turned completely black, like all light had been sucked out of the air. And then the town was gone. Homes, trees, cars, families, all erased. Rescue teams went to the area, hoping to find survivors. But there was nothing left. The land was empty, flat, and quiet, like the place had never been touched by human life. It was the second place to vanish after the missing Mars ship. But this time it was on Earth. and the fear became real for everyone. In response, people across the globe began protesting. Some demanded answers from their governments. Others gathered in groups praying, lighting candles, or reading from old books. The streets were filled with fear and confusion. Meanwhile, the lead scientist who had helped decode the original message was watching all of this unfold with a heavy heart. She had hoped to make contact with something beyond Earth, to open a door of knowledge and growth for the human race. But now she was starting to believe she had opened a door that should have stayed closed. She began to receive threats. Some blamed her for what was happening. Others begged her to fix it. But deep down she knew this wasn't something that could be fixed with machines or codes. Something bigger had been awakened. Something ancient. She returned to the mountains where the black stone chamber had been found. The carvings on the walls hadn't changed, but now they felt louder, clearer. The symbols spoke of past civilizations, ones that had made the same mistake. Civilizations that had challenged the sleeping force in the stars. Civilizations that were no longer remembered. The elder had warned them from the start. He knew the truth not from books but from stories passed down through generations. The force was called Jurash, and it was not alive in the way humans understood life. It had no face, no voice, no shape. It was a force, a response, like gravity or time. It didn't punish out of anger, but it acted when balance was broken. Jurash was awakened when humans sent their challenge into space, not by words but by trying to control. To decode, to break into something that was never meant to be touched. It was not about curiosity, it was about pride. And now the response had begun. The world continued to break apart, not through war, but through silence. Technology failed more each day. Communication became harder. Areas of the planet experienced strange shifts, gravity bending slightly, time skipping forward or slowing down. Scientists were helpless. Nothing followed the laws of nature anymore. A group of people began to act. They were not soldiers or politicians. They were ordinary people, engineers, teachers, farmers, students. They believed the only way to stop this was to return to the beginning, to the cave, to the symbols. They wanted to understand what the elders truly meant, not through machines but through listening, through humility. The lead scientist joined them. She was tired of being in labs and meetings. She wanted to understand the truth with her own eyes and heart. Together, the group camped near the ancient site. The nights were cold and quiet, but the stars above them seemed different, closer, more alive. Some in the group had strange dreams. They dreamed of dark skies, endless oceans in space, and a voice that wasn't a voice but a feeling. A message. It said, "Balance will return." The scientist kept thinking of one line from the carvings, one that no one had fully understood yet. The ones who whisper to the sky must be ready to be heard. Maybe Earth was never supposed to be silent forever. Maybe the mistake wasn't speaking, but how they spoke. With pride, with force, without respect. Back in the cities, people began destroying signal towers. Some believed it would stop the response. Others did it out of fear. But it didn't stop anything. The strange events continued. The governments were losing control. The military couldn't stop what was happening. People started leaving cities, heading for the countryside, to be closer to nature and farther from technology. Everyone was searching for peace or at least safety, but deep in space something had changed. It was no longer just about Earth. The signals had reached beyond. They had touched a place that was never meant to be touched. The universe had heard, and now it was watching, waiting, deciding. The lead scientist looked up at the sky one night, her eyes full of tears. Not from fear, but from understanding. She whispered a simple apology, not to anyone near her, but to the stars above. I didn't listen. And in that moment, far above her, a faint glow moved across the sky. Slowly, gently, like a reply. Not a warning this time, but perhaps a chance. The story was not over. But Earth had been changed forever. The challenge had been made, and now the consequences were unfolding piece by piece. After the faint glow appeared in the sky, many people wondered what it meant. Was it a sign of hope? Or was it something else, something they couldn't yet understand? The world was still full of fear and uncertainty. Every day brought new strange events, new disappearances, and more confusion. The strange lights, the silent satellites, and the vanished towns were no longer isolated mysteries. They had become part of everyday life. People learned to live with the fear quietly in their hearts, trying to carry on with normal routines as much as they could. But beneath the surface, something was changing. The world was shifting, and everyone could feel it. The group that had gathered near the ancient stone chamber was growing stronger. They came from different places and backgrounds. Some were curious, some desperate, but all were searching for answers. The Elder's warning was their guide. They knew they had to listen deeply, not just to the carvings or the stars, but to each other. The lead scientist, who had once believed science could explain everything, had begun to understand something new. Science was important, yes, but it could not explain everything in the universe. There were forces beyond logic, beyond calculation. The universe was more mysterious than any machine or formula. At night, when the group sat around the fire, the Elder shared stories. He told them about the civilizations that had come before, about how they had reached too far and ignored the warnings. These civilizations had powerful technology just like Earth, but they lost everything because they did not respect the balance. Jerash is not a monster, the Elder said softly. It is the force of balance. When a planet or a people lose respect for the natural order, Jerash steps in. Many in the group listened carefully. They began to understand that respect meant more than just being careful with technology. It meant humility, kindness, and acceptance of the unknown. It meant knowing that humans are part of a much larger universe, not its masters. The days passed slowly. The group spent time studying the symbols again, trying to learn what they could from the carvings. Slowly, they began to decode parts of the message that had been missed before. It spoke of harmony, of living in balance with the universe, not trying to control it. One symbol showed two hands reaching out, but not grabbing or holding. Another showed a circle, complete and unbroken, representing unity. These simple images carried a deep message: coexist, don't conquer. Outside the camp, the world was changing in other ways. Cities became quieter as more people left to find safety in smaller towns or rural areas. People helped each other more, sharing food and supplies. Old divisions between nations and groups began to fade, replaced by a growing sense of shared fate. But there were still those who wanted to fight. Some governments refused to accept the strange events as anything other than an attack. They prepared weapons, sent troops to guard important places, and kept searching for enemies, either from other countries or from space. This caused tension. People who believed in peace clashed with those who prepared for war. Arguments broke out in streets and online. Fear and anger often seemed stronger than hope. The lead scientist knew that fighting would only make things worse. If the Elder was right, and Jerash was a force of balance, violence and destruction would only invite more danger. The only way to survive was to learn, to listen, and to change. One night, as the group sat beneath the stars, the Elder spoke again. He said that the force they had awakened was not just watching. It was learning about them too. It was watching how humans responded, whether with pride or humility, violence or peace. Jerash waits to see if we can change, the Elder said. If we can show respect, it may give us a chance to live. This gave the group hope. They knew it would not be easy. Old habits die hard. People had to change their thinking, their ways of living, and their relationship with the world around them. Back in the cities, a movement began to grow. People started to organize peaceful protests and talks about how to live better, more balanced lives. Schools taught about the ancient warnings and the importance of respect for nature. Leaders who had once prepared for war began to speak about peace. Technology was not abandoned, but it was used more carefully. People tried to build things that worked with nature, not against it. Clean energy, sustainable farming, and protecting forests became priorities. Still, not everyone believed the warnings. Some said the strange events were natural disasters or tricks of the mind. Others wanted power and control, and they did not want to give up their weapons or dominance. This created a difficult time for the world. The future was uncertain, but the group near the mountains held on to the Elder's teachings and worked hard to spread the message of balance. One day, the lead scientist made a discovery. She noticed that the strange lights in the sky were changing. They were no longer just random colors or patterns. They were moving in a way that looked like signals, messages sent back from the force in space. The group gathered to watch. Slowly, the lights formed shapes that matched the ancient symbols in the chamber. It was as if the universe was answering them in its own way. Not with words, but with light. This gave everyone courage. Maybe the universe was not angry. Maybe it was waiting for them to understand and to show that they could live in harmony. The elder smiled and said, "This is the first step. The universe has heard us." But he warned that the journey was far from over. Change would take time. There would be setbacks. The force of balance would continue to test humanity. Meanwhile, in places still filled with fear and anger, strange things continued. Small areas of the planet experienced sudden shifts. Sometimes gravity would feel stronger, other times lighter. Time seemed to skip forward or slow down. These were signs that the force was still active. The world was fragile, but it was also filled with hope. The lead scientist thought about the future. She knew that humans had to learn to live not just on Earth, but with the universe. That meant understanding its rules, listening to its messages, and accepting that humans were not the center of everything. It was a humbling thought, but also beautiful. The stars above the mountain camp shone brighter than ever. The group felt a deep connection, not just with the Earth below, but with the vast universe around them. They knew their story was part of something much bigger, a story about respect, balance, and hope. And even though the war had begun when the challenge was made, this war was not just about fighting. It was about learning to live with the universe and with each other, in peace. The elder's warning still echoed softly in their minds. Never challenge what sleeps between the stars, but now they understood it better. It was not a threat. It was a lesson. A lesson that humanity had to learn if it wanted to survive and to thrive. The world was still changing, but something new was beginning to grow, a feeling of hope mixed with caution. People were no longer only afraid. They were starting to listen. The strange lights in the sky had become a symbol, not just of fear, but of something bigger, a chance to understand the universe and maybe even themselves better. The group near the ancient stone chamber had grown closer. They weren't just strangers anymore. They had become friends, a small family united by one purpose: to find a way for humanity to survive this strange challenge. The lead scientist spent long hours studying the new light signals. She believed they were messages, not words, but patterns of light that carried meaning. Slowly, she began to understand their rhythm and flow. The lights were teaching something, about balance, about connection, about the importance of humility. One night, she gathered the group around the fire and shared her thoughts. "These lights," she said quietly, "they are like a conversation. The universe is trying to speak to us, but in a language we are only just beginning to learn." The elder nodded. "That is what I have always said. We must listen with more than our ears. We must listen with our hearts." Outside the camp, the world was still divided. Some people welcomed this new way of thinking. They worked to repair broken relationships, to heal the damage done to the planet. Others resisted. They still wanted power, control, and the ability to defend themselves. The tension was real. Small conflicts broke out in some areas, but those who believed in balance worked hard to stop violence and encourage peace. In the cities, schools changed. Children learned about the universe, about ancient warnings, and about the need to live in harmony. It was a new way of thinking, one that honored the past and looked to the future with hope. The lead scientist thought often about the challenges ahead. She knew that even if the force called Jurash was patient, humans could not wait forever. Change had to happen quickly, but it had to be real and deep. Superficial changes would not be enough. The group started to send messages of their own back into space. They used light, sound, and simple symbols, things that showed respect, peace, and willingness to learn. They hoped these messages would show the universe that humanity was ready to change. But the universe had its own way of testing this. One day, a strange event happened near the camp. The ground shook gently. The air grew warm, and then slowly, a soft light began to rise from the ancient stones. It wasn't frightening. It was peaceful, almost like a hug from the earth itself. The group watched in silence. The light moved like a river, flowing up into the sky and joining the stars above. It was a sign, a connection. The force was responding to their efforts. For the first time, the world seemed to breathe a little easier. News of this light spread. People in towns and cities stopped to look up at the night sky. They felt something different, a quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, humanity was not alone in its struggle. At the same time, the elder warned everyone not to become too proud or careless. "This is just the beginning," he said. The universe is watching how we grow. It will continue to test us. These tests came in different ways. Sometimes strange weather would appear, storms that came without warning or calm that felt too deep. Other times, people experienced moments of strange clarity or deep fear. It was as if the universe was teaching humanity lessons one by one. The lead scientist and her friends worked hard to help people understand these lessons. They traveled to nearby villages, shared stories, and held quiet gatherings where people could speak and listen without fear. The movement of peace and respect grew slowly, but steadily. It was not easy. Old fears and old habits died hard, but little by little, something new was taking root. In the meantime, the technology that once seemed so important began to change. Instead of being used to control or destroy, machines were used to heal and protect. People developed ways to clean the air, grow food without harming the earth, and provide energy without pollution. The lead scientist felt proud but knew that true success would come only when people's hearts changed as much as their technology. One evening, as she sat watching the stars, she thought about the future. She remembered the elders' words, "Never challenge what sleeps between the stars." At first, she had thought this meant fear. Now she understood it meant respect. Respect for the unknown, respect for life, respect for balance, and with that respect came hope. The world was still fragile. The scars of the past were deep, but the light that had risen from the stones was a sign that healing was possible. The group continued their work, knowing that the story of Earth was far from over. But for the first time, they believed the ending could be one of peace. The universe had given humanity a chance. It was up to them to take it. The world had come a long way since the first warning. People had learned that the universe was more than just stars and planets. It was a place of mystery, balance, and great power, power that humans could not control but had to respect. The strange lights in the sky were now a part of daily life. They reminded everyone that Earth was connected to something bigger. Some nights the lights danced gently like a quiet song. Other nights they were brighter, as if encouraging people to keep going. The group near the ancient stone chamber had become a symbol of hope for many. People from all over the world reached out to them, asking for guidance and understanding. The elders' warning, once ignored, had now been embraced as a lesson for all. The lead scientist, who had once only trusted numbers and machines, had grown into a different kind of leader. She knew that knowledge was important, but wisdom was even more so. Wisdom meant knowing when to listen, when to wait, and when to act with care. She often thought about the people who had been lost, the vanished towns, the silent satellites, and the quiet spaces where life had changed forever. Those losses were a reminder of the cost of pride and ignorance. But she also thought about the future. The world was still fragile. Old fears and anger had not disappeared completely. There were still those who wanted to fight, who did not believe in the new way. But they were fewer now. More people were choosing to believe in peace, in respect, and in balance. Communities around the world had started to work together. Borders became less important as people shared resources, knowledge, and stories. Farmers worked with scientists to grow food in ways that helped the land. Cities planted gardens on rooftops and cleaned the rivers. Technology was no longer a tool for power or war. It was a tool for healing and learning. People developed machines that could listen to nature and respond gently. They built homes that used energy from the sun and wind, without harming the earth. The lead scientist helped teach young people how to understand the universe not just through science, but through art, stories, and connection. She told them about the stars, the ancient carvings, and the force called Jurash, the balance that must never be broken. One clear night, as the group sat under the sky, the elder spoke softly. "We have come far," he said, "but the universe will always watch us. We must never forget what we have learned." The young people nodded, feeling the weight of those words. They knew that balance was not a one-time thing. It was a daily choice, to live with respect for the world and each other. Suddenly, the sky above them lit up. The lights formed shapes, symbols of peace and unity, brighter and clearer than ever before. The group watched in wonder as the universe seemed to celebrate with them. It was a sign that the challenge was not over, but that the force of balance was ready to trust humanity again. The lead scientist smiled, feeling tears in her eyes. "We are ready," she whispered, and for the first time the stars seemed to whisper back a quiet promise. The world had been warned. The elders had spoken. The universe had tested them. Now it was time for humanity to live by the greatest lesson of all. Never challenge what sleeps between the stars. Instead, listen, respect, and live in balance, because only then could the universe and Earth exist together forever.